thank you so much all for being here. What a fantastic turnout. I was talking with Jerry a little bit earlier this week, and he was telling me he's recovering from a flu, so you should see him when he's in full health. I'd like to speak to whoever scheduled me right after him. But actually, in truth, it's a really great setup. I'm going to talk about some of the same things Jerry did, but sort of, where are we at now, and what should we be doing? Oh, it's just a second. I'm Helen Scharber. I teach economics at Hampshire College. Jerry and I are actually also both part of a great organization that you should look up called the Center for Popular Economics, where we do workshops and other trainings for activists, anyone who's interested to demystify the economy. That's what we do. populareconomics.org, you can get in touch. So I'm just going to give you some snapshots of inequality in the U.S., or as I titled it, Why the 99% are Pissed Off, Abridged. Is there a better way to do this? Oh, where is it? Okay, so some of this you've probably seen before. There are lots of different ways of measuring income inequality. This is kind of a straightforward one. If you just look at the average income of the top 10% in the country and compare it to the average income of the bottom 10%, you get this number, which is just a ratio. So you can see the least income inequality by this measure, and this is from a 2009 UN report, is Japan. Japan's top 10% have just less than five times more than the bottom 10%. The rest on the left-hand column sort of makes sense. We see Scandinavian countries who are highly redistributive in their policies, a number of former Soviet republics. And then you scroll way down on this list, like 70 countries more, and you get the neighborhood that the United States is in. We're there nestled between Cameroon, Nepal, Ivory Coast, Uganda. So other countries with as many resources as us have generally said, hey, maybe we should spread these out a little more equally and make sure that everybody's able to live a dignified life. But in the U.S., we haven't been doing a very good job of that recently, as Jerry was pointing out. You've probably seen a graph like this, or maybe even this very one. This just shows average household income over the last 30 years or so, basically since the neoliberal era that Jerry mentioned. You can see the top 1%. These are all in real 2007 dollars, so we're compensating or taking out inflation from this. For the top 1%, it's been really good. Average income for the top 1% has nearly quadrupled in that time. For the top 20%, things have also been pretty good. The bottom 4 quintiles, as Jerry was also mentioning, not so good. And that's income. When you look at wealth, the picture's even worse, or depending on who you are, better. But for most of us, we're worse. The top 80%, or the top 20% have more than 80% of the income. As we heard at the beginning, the top 1% have 35% of the wealth, and it's often noted that the sort of culture, the people in the U.S. have a different view on income inequality as the rest of the world, from the rest of the world. We're more tolerant of it. It sort of goes along with our independence streak or something like that. But so these behavioral economists did an interesting study, and it's represented in the bottom 2 bars here. They asked Americans what they thought wealth distribution looked like. So they thought it was unequal, but not nearly as unequal as it actually is. They thought the top 20% had around 60% of the income. And then when asked what they wanted it to be, they wanted it to be far more equal. So it's not as though most people in the US are actually happy with this distribution. This is another sort of lens on wealth inequality in the US. These are median levels of wealth across races. So in 2009, after the financial and economic crisis, median white wealth is a bit above $100,000. Median Hispanic and Black wealth is around $6,000. This is largely because for most people, their main asset or their main form of wealth is their house. So if you don't have a house, you don't have a house anymore after it got foreclosed on, or you have a house in a not very desirable part of town that's not worth very much, your wealth is going to be much lower. So there's just some snapshots of inequality. You might be familiar with this. Maybe you're not. Maybe you were shocked. Maybe you're familiar with it and you're still shocked. I kind of am. But so what's the problem with this? Because economists, so Jerry and I are sort of representing, we're the two economists on this panel, but we don't represent most economic thought. And if you've taken like an Econ 101 type class, you might have seen this in your textbook. The sort of general or accepted economics line on inequality is that, first of all, it's just an outcome of a well-functioning market economy. Because as we learned in economics classes, people are paid, basically, their income is corresponds to how much value they contribute to society. So your income has to do with how productive a member of society you are. So just naturally, some people contribute a lot more, and therefore they have more money. That's the line in economics textbooks. Furthermore, that's not such a bad thing. It's good, actually, because it's inspiring to the rest of us to go ahead and be more productive and contribute more to the economy. And so this quote is just from a relatively recent, like a couple years ago, paper that I thought was just illustrative of this from the vice president of the St. Louis Fed, but this could be virtually any sort of mainstream economist. I just wanted to note, though, that not everyone is so sold on this, and maybe you heard that a week or two ago, 70 students walked out of Greg Mankiw's Harvard Economics 10 class. So Greg Mankiw, maybe he wrote the textbook that some of you have used in an econ class. It's the most widely used introductory economics textbook in the country, maybe the world. And I actually wrote down what they said because I thought it was good. In a statement after they walked out, they said, since the biased nature of Econ 10 contributes to and symbolizes the increasing income inequality in America, we're walking out of your class today both to protest your inadequate discussion of basic economic theory. So basically, there's a lot of inequality, it's a problem, and you barely talk about it. You tell us it's a good thing and that's it. And to lend our support to a movement that's changing American discourse on economic justice. So there's hope. So there's sort of, the idea that inequality is actually good. Also in the media recently, I've seen, I don't know if you saw this, David Brooks' op-ed in the New York Times that he talks about how inequality, or focusing on the gap between the 1 and the 99%, is sort of beside the point. What we should really be focusing on is making sure that everyone at the bottom has the opportunities they deserve. So everybody should be fed, everybody should get the education they want. And so he's trying to sort of steer frame the problem differently. It's not about this rising inequality, it's just we need to focus on meeting people's needs. And that's true, but I contend, and I think a lot of other people do too, that inequality actually makes achieving those other things hard. So you have wealth inequality. That leads to power inequality. That leads to increasing corporate influence in government, among other things. That leads to more wealth inequality because they change the rules of the game to make it better for the elite. Leads to more power inequality. Really, this should be a circle. It's just sort of this vicious circle. And that leads to all these things that Jerry was talking about in part, and I'll talk about a little bit. So when you have that power, then you see the productivity gains not being matched by wage gains. It's good for one group of people, a small group of people, bad for a much larger group of people. You see deregulations that help a small group of people, but were put in place in the first place to protect most citizens. So the financial industry gets deregulated. It basically brings down the economy of our country and the rest of the world, and then those very actors are bailed out. While a whole bunch of other people lose their homes, they lose their savings, they can't find jobs. That power and wealth inequality leads to one group of people getting huge salaries. This shows from 1964 to about 2007, but they haven't dropped much. The very people who sort of engineered this whole crisis are still making a ton of money, and they're arrogant enough sort of to do that and make it public. On the other hand, we have 16% of the country who are either unemployed or aren't working as much as they would like to be. The red line shows the share of corporate taxes as a share of all federal tax revenue. So that's been declining. And then you hear this line over and over again: we need to make tough choices. We need to decide we have this limited pool of funds. What are we going to do with them? Do we spend it on schools or healthcare or Social Security or snow plowing, all this wasteful government spending? And it sort of like blinds us to the real issue. Why don't we have enough funding for that stuff? So just briefly, what is to be done about this? How can we take power back? And I really think that the only way to do it is to organize. We are living in a democracy, and like Jerry said, things can change really quickly. So a lot of people coming together can change things. And in addition to the Occupy movements, which I think are just an amazing example of this, a couple things just from the last 2 weeks that have been really inspiring to me. Voters in Ohio repealed the anti-collective bargaining legislation that their governor pushed through last year, just last Tuesday. 12,000 activists surrounded the White House last weekend to protest a pipeline that would bring dirty tar sands oil from Alberta all the way down to Texas. And earlier this week, Obama, who previously had been sort of assumed that he was going to just push this permit through, said he's delaying it for at least a year, and lots of people think that it's just not going to happen. Both these things happened because people organized and stood up to corporate power. Finally, I just want to say that I think it's kind of the wrong way of thinking about it to target individuals, or to think, that person has money, so they're bad, or to feel guilty about it. I mean, maybe you have money. It's not about that. It's about acting from a place of compassion. People, we're all looking for basically the same things, and to the extent that we can organize based out of love and hope and courage and understanding, that's what makes our movement strong. So, thank you.